Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's episode is going to be about alien encounters and UFO sightings in the state of North Carolina. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on everything I post on my channel. So let's get into it. July 6th, 1970, Charlotte, North Carolina news. About 2 years ago, a Kings Mountain man took a picture of an unidentified flying object outside his house, and the last I heard, a national committee was investigating the incident. Whatever happened? Did anyone decide what he saw? The National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, a private organization, is still investigating the August 1963 sighting at Kings Mountain. We're coming back down to tie up some loose ends. It looks like we'll be ready with a conclusion in a matter of weeks, said a spokesman for the committee in Washington, D.C. The man who first investigated the UFO incident moved out of state and his report got lost. That's why the investigation has taken so long, the spokesman explained. Daniel Shuttles of Kings Mountain reported that he heard a sound like a distant jet airplane, looked up, and saw the disc-shaped, aluminum-colored object with a plastic-like bubble top. He said he was able to snap a picture of it with his Polaroid camera before it sped away. The Air Force, by the way, has killed its Project Blue Book UFO investigations because there's no evidence flying saucers exist. It'll be interesting to see what the committee's findings are. People seeing more UFOs in area. Mount Airy man keeps tally. Winston-Salem Journal, North Carolina, Thursday morning, December 2nd, 1971. A recent worldwide surge of UFO sightings is expected to come to a peak this month, a UFO researcher here said yesterday. George D. Fawcett of 607 North Main Street said sightings are now being reported at the highest rate since the fall of 1967. A worldwide average of 6 an hour, and December is traditionally the month of heaviest sightings. Fawcett, who has been collecting and analyzing UFO sightings for 25 years, said, "It's amazing the number of landings and reports of occupants in the UFOs that have come to my attention in the last 18 months." Fawcett said recent sightings have been reported most frequently in Australia and New Zealand, overseas, and in Kansas and Ohio in the United States. He said the quality of sightings in terms of documentation and verification by more than one source have been much better than a year ago. People are being extremely careful about reporting, he said, primarily because of a fear of ridicule. But I think the climate of opinion has improved during the past year and interest is growing among adults as well as young people. Fawcett estimated that only about 10% of the actual UFO sightings are reported, partly because of fear of bad publicity, and partly because people generally do not know where to report them. In an effort to correct the latter problem, Fawcett said the Midwest UFO Network, based in Quincy, Illinois, is expanding its reporting network and recently named him a district representative responsible for reporting sightings in Forsyth and Surry counties. Fawcett said he would welcome reports of both old and new sightings and would call them to the attention of the Midwest Group and about 12 other UFO study groups. He said names will be kept confidential if requested. Fawcett said about 25% of the sightings investigated by the Air Force's Project Blue Book, which closed down a few years ago, were never explained to the satisfaction of UFO watchers. Fawcett reported 2 sightings in North Carolina this year. The most recent was on August 19th in Salisbury, in which a businessman reported seeing colored UFOs in the sky and said an object giving off a beeping sound left a circle of burned grass in his front yard. Fawcett said some material said to have been left by the object was sent to the National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomena in Washington for study. He said the other sighting was reported in March by a Mount Airy man who had been laughing behind my back for the last 20 years. He said the man and his son said a UFO the size of an automobile with multicolored lights windows, and a bubble top followed their car while they were driving from Low Gap to Mount Airy. Fawcett said he is now working on a magazine article on UFOs and hopes to start work soon on a book based on the sightings he has investigated over the years. Strange objects in skies keep Salisburyans peeping. Salisbury Post, North Carolina, August 19, 1971. The next time you see a bright moving object in the night sky above Rowan County, don't shrug it off as an airplane or a shooting star until you are convinced that's what it is. But can you always be certain? Americans land on the moon. The space about this planet is boundless. Might there be someone out there in the darkness? A being from a civilization equal to or superior to ours, traveling to our world? Flying saucers. Bah, comic strip stuff, you say. But can you be certain? Two Salisbury men now look at the sky in wonderment. They do not dismiss each light in the night as natural. But when they aren't willing to tell all their acquaintances they believe in flying saucers, people might stare and say, "Poor fella, been working too hard, needs a rest." The two men, call them Bob and Ted, and their families frequently go to the northwestern section of the county at night to watch the lights in the sky and wait for a UFO, unidentified flying object. Bob has been intensely interested in flying saucers during the past 6 to 8 weeks. Some nights you don't see any UFOs, but then there are those nights. If you go out and look for them long enough, you are going to see them, Bob said recently. He talked in a secluded place in his store, afraid someone else might hear, someone who is not a true believer in UFOs. The lights act strangely. They appear to be a disc-shaped object giving off a white, sometimes a red, sometimes a blue, light. Whenever an aircraft approaches their vicinity, the lights go out, reappearing when the airplanes are gone. They can move in any direction and at varying speeds. The lights zoom vertically, horizontally, or at an angle. They can hover in the sky for moments, then zoom. They soar off rapidly. Bob thinks a spaceship may even have landed in his front yard. He's not convinced, mind you. It may have been a prank, but then can you be certain? Bob awoke one morning recently to a beeping noise that seemed to come from the front yard. The time was between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. He doesn't know why now, but Bob did not get up to investigate the noise. He recalls that the dogs in the neighborhood were barking. That's the way they act whenever the UFOs in the night are sighted on one of his night excursions, Bob explains. They seem to hear something that humans cannot. When Bob's son began to mow the front lawn that morning, he found two odd places in the grass. The grass in these areas appeared to have been burned. They were across from each other, and they formed part of a circle. The outer edges of this circle were formed by scorched grass. A residue of some sort was on the grass. Bob had a friend analyze it in his lab. The conclusion was that it was carbon from an exhaust. Bob also found particles of a material which looked like cotton. When these particles were taken to the friend's lab, they would not dissolve in any of the available chemicals. Instead of becoming softer, they became harder. Bob called the National Investigation Committee on Air Phenomena in Washington, D.C. about his findings. The man on the telephone advised him that the incident may have been a prank, but Bob wasn't sure. Ted is a new convert to UFO believers. Bob has been interested in the possibility of extraterrestrial beings and their travels for 18 to 20 years and had read much about the topic. Ted and his wife were once among the people who think flying saucers are fantasy. That is, until one night in Thomasville. The couple had stopped at a spotlight at the Chair City. It was in a residential area. Suddenly, the interior of their car lit up brightly. Ted, thinking it was a driver who approached from the rear with his lights on high beam, adjusted his mirror to reflect the light into the other guy's eyes, but the intensity of the light remained. As he rounded a corner, Ted looked into his side view mirror. There were no other vehicles behind him. He pulled his car to a halt and got out. In the sky, there was a bright light. There was no noise. The object hovered above a school momentarily, then shot up into the sky. It was the making of a believer. Bob and Ted do not blindly accept everything they see in the night sky as a UFO. They temper their wonderment with a bit of doubt. The lights in the northwestern section of the county may have a simple explanation. A resident of Goodman Drive shoots rockets into the sky. Paul Hammer Jr. says that he has launched over 700 rockets in the last 8 months. The rockets have blinking lights and are capable of reaching 10,000 feet. They drift to the ground by parachute. Bob admits that the rockets may be the UFOs he and Ted have watched in the sky. The lights on the rockets, the parachute which could cause the rockets to hover or move about with wind currents as it descends, it all seems logical. But the rockets don't explain the sightings Bob and Ted have made in other places, in Thomasville, for instance. They don't explain a large cigar-shaped object with portholes which Bob once sighted on his way from Statesville. There may be no flying saucers. Is this something that our country or some other country has, or something from up there, Bob asks. Who can be certain? Saucers are flying again. April 13th, 1971, Mount Airy News, North Carolina. Flying saucers, or unidentified flying objects, as the UFO buffs prefer to call them, are peppering the American skies in 1971, according to a Mount Airy native who keeps up with the elusive craft. George D. Fawcett, now a resident of Greenville, Tennessee, reported that he has a sighting report from 2 Low Gap area residents of a UFO in that area on March 13th. Fawcett said his report shows that Jim Barber and his son Blair Jr., 11, observed through binoculars an object in the sky about 7 a.m. on March 13th. The object appeared to be about the size of an automobile at a high altitude and flashed purple, green, blue, orange, and white lights, according to Fawcett. He said that the senior Barber reported the object had 4 windows, was round, and had a complex on the top. He described the UFO as disc-shaped, according to Fawcett, having a bubble dome on the top and giving off yellow and purple colored lights. It was a circular aircraft, he added. The craft was reported to have circled the eyewitnesses and to have followed their car part of the way home from the Low Gap Wildlife Club before it shot straight into the air and disappeared in the distance. Fawcett said this report was identical to a January 22nd report from Norwalk, Ohio, and a report on February 15th from Spooner, Wisconsin. A follower of UFO reports for the past 24 years, Fawcett welcomes all reports of similar nature. The Charlotte News, Tuesday, January 23, 1973. Staffers see object 3 times. News photographer Tommy Franklin and I loaded his cameras, telephoto lens, lights, and our overnight bags into my car at 6:15 Wednesday night. His wife and 3 of his children watched. Our assignment: follow Gerald Summy in his semi-trailer truck on the 500-mile drive to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and see if we could see what he says he sees and get pictures of the unidentified flying object. And you know what? We did see it 3 times. The idea of following a tractor-trailer truck for more than 1,000 miles was not Tommy's idea of a fun assignment. He didn't want to go, looked on it as a wild goose chase. He didn't believe in flying saucers, and the idea of trying to photograph one was, well, ridiculous. Me? when the magnitude of what might be out there, after talking to Gerald Summey and his peers, had left me a bit overwhelmed at first. I had never seen a flying saucer. True, I've known perfectly sane people who say they have, and while I didn't discredit them, neither did I believe. Anyway, I settled down and began to look forward to the assignment. Tommy told his family goodbye and we drove to Acres Motor Lines Terminal, where we were met by Summey and his partner, Douglas Pye. We talked about where to stop for gas, what to do if we got separated, how to signal for stops. At 7:30 p.m., we left Charlotte. The drivers carried a two-way radio in the truck cab, and we carried one in the car. We could talk back and forth fine as long as we stayed within about a mile of each other. Traffic was heavy, and my nervous stomach had returned as we took I-85 toward Greensboro. Just before we reached Concord, the lights on the back of the big semi flashed, and the right-hand turn signal blinked. The truck pulled over, and Summey was out, racing toward us and pointing wildly to the right. The saucer, I thought. We'll see it now, get pictures, and go home. Grabbing his camera, Tommy hopped out of the car. I shut the motor off and turned on my flashers. I grabbed the binoculars I'd brought along and slid across the seat to the right. There it is, Summey was saying, still pointing skyward. All I could see was the blinking light on a tower of some sort of an airplane. Tommy had his camera up, but couldn't find anything. Where is it? I don't see anything, he said. Summey calmed down a moment and focused our attention on what looked like a low, bright star. It moved toward Charlotte a bit, then stopped. Tommy said he could then see something through the camera lens, but it wasn't close enough to tell what, nor to photograph. Traffic zipped by. I rested the binoculars on the side of the car. I could see an oval-shaped blur of bright greenish-white light with a rosy glow near the center. It is something oval, and it is bright, I told the others. The object began to dance up and down so rapidly that the lights formed an erratic pattern in the sky, much like the pattern of the heartbeat of a dying person on a scanner in an operating room. The colors were beautiful, appearing more green and white than before. The rosy part added to the beauty. I see it, I told Tommy. He took the binoculars and was visibly affected. But Tommy, a calm, unexcitable fellow, remained for the most part calm and unexcitable. I can't get a picture, it's too far away, he said. Summey was excited. He raced down the slope into the nearby field, calling as he ran, "It may come into me if I go out there." All he succeeded in doing was to get his feet wet in the muddy field. "It'll come in closer. It'll come right to me before the night is over," he said. He climbed back into the truck, and we put our equipment into the car and set out again. We stopped in Greensboro on US 29 for barbecue sandwiches and hot coffee. The drivers talked about how much Acres frowned on drivers who drink on the road or pop pills to stay awake. I had already been told by the firm officials that this is a firing offense. Summey pointed out what he said was the object before we reached Rustburg, Virginia, where we stopped for coffee again. Tommy wasn't sure again. In the meantime, he focused on something else which looked much like what we'd seen the first time. It was staying with us, though at a distance. Summey ran out into the field there too, but to no avail. At Rustburg, we stopped at a truck stop. Again, Tommy and I looked at the object through the binoculars. It still was oval, but more, as Tommy put it, like a tire spinning with the treads toward us. People inside the truck stop looked out the window at us. Inside the restaurant, people were teasing Summey and Pye about what they say they have been seeing. Summey stuck to his story, even invited them to go outside and see for themselves. They didn't. Pye was quiet. We left the restaurant in high spirits. Summey suggested Pye ride with us and he go alone to see if the object would come closer. Pye crawled into the back of my car and we drove to the entrance and stopped to wait for Summey to pass and lead. He didn't come. Pye suggested he may have gone out the lower drive and would be waiting for us at the gas station in Lynchburg. We couldn't raise him on the radio. Summy wasn't at the station. As the attendant filled my car with gas and cleaned the windshield, Tommy called over the radio. "Gerald, come in, Gerald." "Okay, Gerald, you can stay up there a little while." Then he'd stare through the binoculars at the object again. It wasn't going anywhere. It might as well have been just another star for all we could tell without the binoculars. Pi still thought Summy was ahead of us. After 30 minutes of driving, he was beginning to be concerned. We had turned the car around and headed back toward the restaurant when Tommy said the object was behind us. That's when Pi again said he was sure we'd find Summy parked on down the road because that thing stayed with him. Turning again, we found Summy parked about 5 miles further than we'd gone on the first lap. The trip was resumed. Around the Washington bypass, there were airplanes that looked similar with their blinking lights, but it was easy to distinguish them through the binoculars. There simply was no comparison. We drove for miles. About 4 a.m. Thursday, a skeptical Tommy and I were getting tired. We decided to not drop out at that point because we had nothing except our word for what we had seen. We'd follow through until the broad daylight, then check into a hotel and get some rest. At 6:40 a.m., the sun was trying to show its face. The sky was a soft lavender and rose over Thurman, Maryland. Not a star was in sight. The moon was beginning to fade in the west. Summy again signaled, stopped the truck, and pointed out the object. It was brighter, and Tommy began taking pictures. I looked through the binoculars. The same sparkly oval was there. It was almost like a Ferris wheel spinning, its lights a blur of rosy red, greenish white. A magnificent sight. It was lower and closer than it had been at any time all night, but still not close enough to distinguish from a star with the human eye. Tommy exchanged the camera for the glasses. The bright blur lifted a little in the sky, but it was still not going to come in to naked eye range, it seemed. Tommy and I felt a sense of awe at the sight. This was not a plane, nor a weather balloon, nor a stationary light. Of that we were certain. We rode on down the highway, Tommy watching with binoculars, me driving. I could see the brightness to our right at a glance out the window. A pinpoint of light accented against a lavender cloud in an otherwise empty sky. Then, as the moon settled and the sun rose, the object lifted out of sight, leaving us to wonder at what we really had seen. Tommy looked at me and expressed my unspoken thoughts. "I'm a believer," he said. Strange object here is reported. May 22, 1988. From the Gastonia Gazette, North Carolina. First, let me tell you, I'm sane, and I'm not a fanatic, DeVoyle Butcher of Kings Mountain said over the telephone. Neither was Butcher drunk Saturday evening when he saw the flying saucer off of I-85 between Gastonia and Kings Mountain. The sight Butcher saw was so strange that he stopped his car, got out, and observed the object for 8 minutes. At first I thought it was a Goodyear blimp, he reported. It came straight out of the sky and hovered 350 to 400 feet above ground. Butcher said the object was moving slowly, around 40 miles per hour. Butcher described the UFO as round, about 40 feet in diameter, with 2 small windows. It made no sound. 2 lights, one on the front and one on the back, blinked on and off every 10 seconds. The object was sighted at 8:40 p.m. Butcher checked his watch. 8 minutes later, it headed toward Bessemer City and disappeared. "It was the strangest thing I ever saw," Butcher commented. "I don't know why no one else saw it." The Kings Mountain man, who lives at 703 West Mountain Street, said he didn't call the Gazette sooner because he knew people would say he was crazy. At first, he told no one, but he couldn't keep it to himself. Those he told urged him to call. This is the second UFO reported by a Kings Mountain man in recent months. The Sun Journal, New Bern, North Carolina, November 13, 1970. UFOs seen in skies over city. There was something strange but beautiful in the skies over New Bern early this morning, and it set off a rash of rumors and telephone calls to police, FAA officials, and newspaper and radio stations. What the pale blue or white ball-like UFO was remains a mystery, but some observers say it was a weather balloon. Others declared it was the Russian moon ship, while a third group maintained it was the planet Venus. The object, seen by dozens of persons in the area, appeared in the southeastern skies and seemed to hover in the early morning sunlight. No vapor trails or movement could be detected from the ground. FAA spokesman said they had seen the object, but it was not, as far as they knew, a weather balloon. The Associated Press told the Sun Journal that the object apparently did not come from the NASA facility at Wallops Island, Virginia. One report said that officials at Seymour Johnson AFB declared the mysterious sighting was nothing more than Venus inverted. This, they explained, caused the planet to become magnified and appear larger and more easily seen by the naked eye. Jimmy Smith, physics instructor at New Bern High School, told the Sun Journal that he did not see the object, but the explanation given by the FAA was probably correct. He declared that if the sightings were not of a weather balloon, there are still many other logical explanations. Although the airport in New Bern is now using a ceilometer to detect cloud formations, officials said that the UFO sighting was not in any way connected with the new equipment. At least one person who claimed to have seen the object stated it was probably caused by black magic associated with Friday the 13th. This theory was quickly denied by a number of experts. At press time today, rumors were still circulating about the sighting, and efforts to identify the UFO were underway. The observations were made in clear weather, and no clouds were in sight to hinder the view of persons watching the object as it hung majestically in the blue sky. Unidentified flying object sighted. The Eden News, Eden, North Carolina, Wednesday, February 9, 1972. It wasn't an illusion that made an unannounced intrusion on the Eden scene starting at 8 p.m. Thursday, February 3rd, and 2 Eden residents vouch for this. They note their experience in a talk with a news reporter, despite the fact they are a bit uneasy in telling of the story. It was about 8 p.m. Things were quiet at Bob's Mobile Homes on NC 14 in South Eden. Henry H. Harris Jr., manager of the firm, looked out the window towards the general direction of Central Animal Hospital. Suddenly, he saw it. A bright light, below cloud level, something like a star, but not a star. It was like a very bright streetlight, but it wasn't as big as a streetlight, Harris told the Eden News. It then occurred to him to get someone else to take a look to see if what was there was really there. "Am I seeing things?" Harris asked Perk Brown Jr., salesman for Bob's Mobile Homes. Brown stretched, got out of a chair, and ambled toward the window. "Yep, I saw it too," he told this newspaper. Then he added, "I hated to say I saw it and tell people I did because they might think I was losing it. You know how that is? But someone else said he saw it, so that made me feel better." Brown, too, said the object in the sky looked like a big, bright ball. The fact it was below cloud level took away the possibility it could be a star, but it did look a lot like the North Star, Harris noted. After they watched it for a while, they got sick of the vigil and quit. But at about 8:30 or 8:40 p.m., the object looked like the size of an egg and very red, Harris reported. He said he was kidding with Brown with a remark, "Someone is watching us." Then, about 8:45 p.m., the object, star, spy, plane, spacecraft, whatever it was gone. Both Harris and Brown swear by the stars they saw it. This next article is in the same newspaper as the previous sighting. Second sighting of UFO reported. Apparently, the UFOs find Eden interesting. At least Miss Carolyn Radford of the city's Draper section is inclined to believe this. She saw an unidentified flying object and tracked its course Monday night for about an hour before it headed for Wrightsville. This was the second time within a week that such an object has been seen in this area. Two of Miss Radford's colleagues at Low Weef in Eden, Jeff Fain and Ralph Emerson, called her at her home about 8:45 Monday. She and a friend immediately set out towards the radio station where Fain and Emerson said they saw the object around the broadcast tower. Miss Radford said as she approached the boulevard, the object looked 3 times larger than a large star. It was reddish. Then as she drew even nearer to the station, it appeared to be about twice as big as a star, but its color appeared to be green with blinking lights. The object would go forward, turn, dip, and then stop. Then it would back up, she said. All of this was happening around the radio tower. Miss Radford said she and her friend drove to a service station on Bridge Street and the object kept pace with the car. Then the object disappeared, she said. They headed back toward the boulevard and saw the object near the tower, and then suddenly, it headed towards Wrightsville and disappeared from view. Miss Radford said Fain is getting ready just in case it comes back. He's got a high-speed camera and film. Of course, there are always those who laugh at things that can't be related to logic or universal truths. So those who hold to them are sort of way out, she admits. But phenomena around us ought to be investigated. By learning we know, and by knowing we're better people, she concludes. What was it? Stanley News and Press, Albemarle, North Carolina, October 10th, 1972. What was it? Victor Devereaux of Baden reported sighting an unidentified flying object Sunday about 10:30 a.m. The object, which he estimated to be 3,000 to 4,000 feet up and moving around 300 miles an hour, made no sound. He estimated it to be around 120 feet long and as large around as a house. He said that he observed it very clearly in the cloudless sky, that it was silver-colored, was shaped something like a dumbbell, much like a railroad tank car with enlarged ends which tapered to a cone-like point. Mr. Devereaux said that he was facing west as he observed it move from the northeast toward the southwest, and that he watched it until it was out of sight. He said he could detect no sound from it, and that it had no gondola beneath, nor any apparent windows. He also said he looked carefully trying to detect any wings or tail surfaces, but saw none. I saw something, he said to the news and press reporter, but I don't know what it was. He said he was aware that a dirigible was in the Charlotte area Sunday afternoon, but that this object was not shaped at all like a dirigible. This story comes from the Lamina News, Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, June 25, 2010. Wrightsville UFO sighting. Orange ball forms V formation. Call the men in black. UFOs may have come to Wrightsville Beach. According to a report lodged with the Mutual UFO Network, a Colorado-based nonprofit whose mission it is to apply scientific analysis to UFO sightings, a group of 9 residing in a beach house on South Lamina Avenue said on Tuesday, June 22nd, they sighted an odd ball of reddish-orange light blinking erratically and hovering silently above the ocean. Next, the ball was joined by a small white light out of nowhere. After that, the object suddenly disappeared. One of the objects is said to have reappeared a couple of minutes later, breaking into 9 separate orbs and then reassembling into a V shape. This shape hovered about a mile or 2 offshore, roughly 10 degrees above the horizon before disappearing again. We were all shocked, and we all agreed that what we saw was not man-made, the report reads. The movement was too fluid, and the speed at which it divided was extremely fast and controlled. The report yields very little by way of clues as to the witness's identity, nor does it speculate as to what the lights may have been, except to imply that a group of helicopters and a pair of fighter jets flying nearby may have had something to do with it. A woman who answered the phone at the Carolina Yacht Club said no one here had seen or heard anything in regard to a UFO sighting. According to the report, helicopters descended over the ocean shortly after the sighting. At about 11:45 p.m., a pair of fighter jets flew parallel to the shore. The report poses a question as to why fighter jets flew so close to a residential community, and it implies that helicopters circling the area on the Wednesday that followed may have had some connection to the UFO. Wednesday was the day that the U.S. Coast Guard station Wrightsville Beach was conducting a series of training exercises with the New Hanover County Regional Medical Center Airlink helicopter around Masonboro Island. Catawba police spot UFO. A weird thing. Thursday morning, March 16, 1972, from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Winston-Salem Journal. Police officers and deputies in Catawba County say they spotted an unidentified flying object which gave off a greenish-blue light and flew at great speed early yesterday. It was faster than a plane, said Sergeant M. Elmore of the Newton Police, who saw the object about 12:30 a.m. It went across at a heck of a speed. It was a weird thing, I tell you. Witnesses said the object was round and gave off a bright, reflecting greenish-blue light that blipped like an electrocardiogram. It came to a sudden stop over the business district and began moving in a slow up and down motion, just like it was suspended in air, Moore said. In a few minutes, it moved on in a southwest direction. Moore said he and Officer T.W. Huffman, with him in the patrol car when the object was first spotted, drove to a ballpark and observed the strange light for nearly a half hour. The officers said it could not possibly have been a balloon because of its erratic and high-speed flight. They also ruled out helicopters because the object was silent. Newton's police chief, J.D. Kirkman, did not see the object, but said it apparently was the same thing seen earlier by another officer. One of our officers, Paul Burgess, has seen it before, and he's been here 2 years, said Kirkman. It's the same thing, all right. They compared notes, and it's the same thing. Dr. Parker makes a case for the UFO phenomena. April 6, 1972, Greensboro Daily News, Greensboro, North Carolina. First, you should know this. Dr. Franklin Parker is no kook. He is a quiet-spoken, scholarly man in his 50s, a professor of history at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, whose specialty is the history of Central America, about which he has written 2 books. It is also important to know that Dr. Parker is not a reader of science fiction, nor is he one of these UFO nuts that pops up occasionally. The fact is that he had never given much thought at all to unidentified flying objects until just recently. And that might not have happened except that Dr. Parker also teaches a course in the history of the world since 1945, and since textbooks on his recent history were scant, he set about some time ago to write his own. He wrote it in sections covering 5-year periods, and when he came to the period for 1955 to 1960, the predominant event was man's first thrust into space. And the books that he researched about this happened to be on the same shelf in the library as books about UFOs, and, thinking that he should perhaps add a paragraph to his book about the UFO phenomena, Dr. Parker read several books about the matter, most of them sensational. He also read the final report of a scientific study of UFOs which was done for the Air Force by the University of Colorado. That report, known as the Condon Report, concluded that the UFO sightings were not worthy of further scientific pursuit. After all, 94% of all UFO sightings prove explainable on examination as something other than visitors from space. 6% unexplained. Still, there is that 6% of reliable and unexplainable sightings, and one book that Dr. Parker came across dealt with those. It was called Challenge to Science, the UFO Enigma, and it was a graph of these sightings covering a number of years. The interesting thing about this graph to Dr. Parker was that it had a rhythm to it. For example, there were only 8 such sightings reported in the world in 1947, 20 in 1948, 6 in 1949, 20 in 1950, 5 in 51, 29 in 52. But in 1954, the line on the graph zoomed out of sight. There were 288 such sightings in September and October of that year alone. This stayed on Dr. Parker's mind when he went home from work that day, and even after he had gone to bed, he continued to mull it over. He did not think that these unexplainable sightings should be taken too lightly. And since we are hurling objects and men into space with regularity, he did not see why there might not be somebody else out there somewhere, perhaps far more developed than we are, who might be doing the same thing. He knew that science had shown quite conclusively that intelligent life does not exist within our own solar system except on Earth. So if somebody was watching us, they would have to come from another solar system, and the logical place to look for them would be the next nearest solar system. As a young man, Dr. Parker had read a lot of astronomy, and he knew that the nearest star to our sun is Alpha Centauri, which is actually 3 suns, the predominant one, Alpha Centauri A, being very similar to our own sun. He knew, too, that Alpha Centauri was 4.3 light-years away, and he reasoned that the star could have one or several planets similar to Earth which could bear intelligent life. And as he lay there thinking, the idea began to come together. It was a simple thing, really, a matter of mathematics, and it would explain the rash of unexplainable UFO sightings in 1954. Scientific people wary. Dr. Parker's explanation is this. When Earthmen exploded their first nuclear bombs on July 16th, August 6th, and August 9th, 1945, their noise attracted the attention of intelligent beings on a planet of Alpha Centauri A. Those being sky monitors, far more sensitive than ours, picked up the unintended messages 4.3 light-years away, in October through November 1949. When beings in the vicinity of Alpha Centauri knew something was happening on this planet, they had already been aware of the existence of life on Earth. They readied a reconnaissance equipped of some kind. That equipage leaving Alpha Centauri's system sometime in late 1949 or early 1950 and traveling near the speed of light then reached the Earth 4 and a fraction years later, in September through October 1954. Why did the Alpha Centauri beings not deign to make contact with Earthmen? One can think of a number of possible reasons. Perhaps we of the Earth are not yet arrived at the standards deemed necessary by them for inclusion in space society, not eligible to become members of what may be a very extensive club. More likely, the Earth probes carried out by Alpha Centauri beings were unmanned missions, designed only to take an extensive look at what we have without disturbing our mode of living. We may in fact be interesting to them, as we are, either to help them understand their own past, or to help them comprehend a form of being whose very essentials of life may be radically different from theirs. Whatever their intentions, ours should be to determine whether they are there. This is why Dr. Parker set his idea onto paper. He thinks his idea deserves investigation by the scientific community. Getting somebody to take it seriously is another matter, though, and he knows that too. A great many people, especially scientific people, are quite wary about anything to do with UFOs. But getting somebody to read his idea and take it seriously is his goal nevertheless. He has presented it in a letter to the Director General of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, but so far he has received no reply. Since that time, he has elaborated on his idea, 5 single-spaced pages. I don't think it's a wild-eyed thing, he says. I really don't. If it turns out to have some validity, I think it will be quite sensational news. What was it? Tourist asks. Eerie light seen. November 30th, 1970, from the Dunn Record. Motorists going through Dunn early today reported a strange light going on and off in the southeastern sky. 2 of them stopped at WCKB Studios on 421 South to ask about the light. What it was not known immediately. It was an eerie light that stripped across the sky and went on and off. Recently, other such lights were seen to the northeast, but they were caused by rockets firing at Wallops Island, Virginia. This was in a different direction this morning. The Ellenboro UFO. Forest City, this week, January 10th, 1973. First, there was the monster of Mount Vernon, and now? I know people are going to think I'm crazy, said Billy Gowan of Ellenboro, but I don't care. I saw it. What Gowan, a freshman at East High, saw was, well, let him tell it. It was about 10:15 Monday morning, and I was on the phone calling Pat Nanny. Gowan is the East High reporter for radio station WBBO. And all of a sudden, my radio started acting funny, squealing. I glanced out the kitchen window and saw this thing in the air. And therein lies his tail. It was tilted slightly, and it was coming down toward the ground. It hovered a bit, blowing snow up, and then I watched it land. It was a red and gold thing. Really weird, with some kind of orange-colored, I guess it was flame, coming out of it. It was about a foot high and 4 or maybe 5 inches in diameter, but it was squarish, not round. I couldn't really get a perfect description of it because I never got real close. About 50 feet is as close as I ever got. Anyway, Gowan's conversation with Pat Nanny was cut extremely short. I hung up the phone, grabbed my camera, and ran outside. I stopped and took a picture of it sitting on the ground, and then, as I started to move closer to it, it took off. It was like, well, you've seen them take off from the moon and all that stuff blows up. It looked like that. It went straight up for about 50 feet, and then there was a sound like a shotgun firing, and it took off real fast and flew away. Whatever it was left a hole in the snow about 3 inches across and cleared to the ground beneath. There are all these little black particles in the snow around it, and this greenish-looking stuff in the hole in the snow. It doesn't smell very good at all. Gowan said he photographed the hole and then took samples of the greenish-looking stuff, mixed with a little snow, and put it in a test tube, which he showed me. It looked, well, green. He said the thing appeared to be controlled, maybe by radio or something. I don't really know. He offered no theories about what it might have been. I have never seen anything like it. I have seen more weird things in the sky on occasion, but never anything like this, he said. All of which leaves Billy, the only eyewitness, with a roll as of yet undeveloped colored film, hopefully containing some documentation of his experience, and a test tube full of green liquid, which he says he would like to have analyzed if he had any idea where to have it done at. And me? I just report. You can come to your own conclusions. And until the film is developed and or the green stuff analyzed, and possibly even thereafter, I will refrain from comment on this particular incident. Fawcett reports UFO sighting in Mount Airy. Mount Airy Times, Mount Airy, North Carolina, February 16, 1973. A local sighting of an unidentified flying object has been reported by George D. Fawcett, well-known Mount Airy UFO investigator. The UFO was sighted Saturday night, February 3rd at 8 o'clock. Witnesses, Fawcett said, described the blood-red circular object as 18 feet in diameter and or much larger, and giving off smoke or exhaust on its outer edges. It revolved as it moved up into the sky from almost ground level. The UFO, he said, was seen by Mr. and Mrs. Bobby Williams, 507 Lovell Street, and Mr. and Mrs. Sam Jones, 413 South Street. Both made independent reports to Fawcett, he stated, without knowing of the other's experience, and were very much relieved to hear that others had seen the same object at approximately the same time. The Jones family reported that the UFO moved at about a 45-degree angle above the old Kroger store on Willow Street in a northeast direction, while the Williams family saw it move toward the North Main Street Dry Bridge direction. Both families were watching TV when they were distracted by a sudden flash of brilliant red light that lit up the inside of their homes from one end to the other, Fawcett said. He stated that Williams went outside his home to investigate and saw the strange object move up into the sky. Jones and his 14-year-old son Ricky ran outside to view the UFO, while Mrs. Jones and the couple's other 5 children, who were frightened, remained indoors. Fawcett said he feels sure other witnesses saw the object, but fearing ridicule, remained silent. He requests anyone else who saw the object to report it to him at his home, 607 North Main Street. He said he will keep the reports confidential if so requested. Get ready, skeptics. More UFOs sighted. Elkin Tribune, North Carolina, March 27, 1970. Despite the risk of jeers from skeptics, 3 Elkin and 2 Boonville teenagers say they watched 3 unidentified flying objects for 5 minutes just east of here between 9 and 9:15 p.m. Wednesday. During their observance of the phenomena, they insist these objects were not helicopters or airplanes. One of the UFOs moved out of the sighting area. A jet airplane moved onto the scene, they said, and began to pursue the remaining 2 UFOs. Earlier, the UFOs had appeared to have been stationary. With the arrival of the jet, the UFOs accelerated and eluded the chase aircraft, the 5 boys said. The youngsters who reported the sighting to a Tribune correspondent are Charlie Foster, son of J.B. Foster of Oakland Drive, Elkin; Junior Blackburn, son of Earl Blackburn of the Thomason Apartments, Elkin; Lee Boer, son of James A. Boer of Westover Park, Elkin; and Tommy Prim and William Shores, both of Boonville. The place of the sighting was along NC Highway 268 between Elkin and Rhonda, along the ridge west of W.E. Sale & Sons, Inc. Charlie Foster and Junior Blackburn summed up what all 5 observed. 3 stationary blinking lights. The lights were white and red. These flashed on and off at regular intervals. Then one of the UFOs moved north to the horizon. It did not return. The other 2 vehicles moved slowly westward side by side, and then, passing directly overhead, a jet appeared on the scene and vectored toward the objects. They accelerated and remained ahead of the jet as all went out of sight on the western horizon. Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Wednesday morning, July 1st, 1970. It wasn't a yellow-bellied sapsucker. Birdwatcher has answer to fish kill. Did some kind of pollution kill all those fish in the Yadkin River recently? Or was it a flying saucer? Someone we know only as Faithful Reader thinks it may have been a flying saucer he says he saw just 2 days before the fish started dying. Faithful Reader didn't sign any other name. Faithful Reader said this was because he or she fears public ridicule. Faithful Reader, we know, is a birdwatcher, but read the letter. I usually carry my camera with me on all of my little observation hikes to photograph some of the birds that are within good camera range. 2 days before the fish kill, Faithful Reader was hiking along the north bank of the Yadkin River between State Highway 801 and US 601. Suddenly, Faithful Reader noticed a tree that had been stripped of all its leaves but was starting to sprout again. Faithful Reader felt this was remarkable, but he or she hadn't seen anything yet. Suddenly, there was a silver, saucer-shaped aircraft of some kind, slowly rising into the air over the river. I estimate that the thing was most likely 30 feet in diameter. Faithful Reader snapped a picture before the thing somehow propelled itself straight up into the sky with a speed so great that it excelled anything I have ever observed before. Since seeing this remarkable aircraft, Faithful Reader reported, I have been so badly shaken that I have not attended to my birdwatching. Faithful Reader is extremely nervous about this whole thing and would like to know if anyone else saw the same thing. If anyone has seen Faithful Reader's hat, please let us know. You'll know it if you see it, about 30 feet in diameter. Who can explain strange sight? The Charlotte News, Charlotte, North Carolina, Friday, February 11th, 1972. Dear Personal Chat, you're going to find this story really hard to believe, but I swear it really happened. Since it occurred, my brain has been trying to think of a way to handle the situation. The reason I'm writing chat is because I can't tell it openly, but I need help. Early Thursday morning, I was coming home from a party. It was not a wild party, and I had only had 2 drinks. I was on Providence Road and had just dropped my girl off when I saw it. At first I thought it was a satellite, as its brightness was similar to one. But suddenly, its speed picked up and its direction in the north sky changed by an angle of close to 90 degrees. Planes and satellites don't move like that. It appeared to be heading straight for the car, so I slammed on the brakes. It seemed to be vaguely triangular shaped, with rapidly rotating and pulsating lights of different colors. It was completely silent as I rolled down the window to see if I could hear anything. Just at that moment, a dog from a nearby yard came barking into the street at the thing in the sky. Suddenly, an orangish-yellow beam shot down and the dog disappeared. The aircraft hovered a few seconds more and then quickly departed. I know many people reading this letter will think I'm a fake. I'm not a fake, and I know what I saw. I've never believed in UFOs, but this experience has really shaken me. I appreciate hearing from anyone who might have seen anything unusual Tuesday night or who has had an experience with a UFO. The next sections I'm going to read are in direct response to this person's sighting. Did the thing get his dog? Dear converted non-believer, I don't believe you're a fake. I hope you really know what you saw because it would explain the disappearance of my dog. I am 19 and live with my parents on Providence Road. On the night you saw that thing, I was having a late night snack when my dog started barking outside. I started toward the dog to hush him up, but the barking stopped. I walked on out and whistled for him, but he didn't come. I called a few more times and got no response, so I gave up. The next 2 days, there was no sign of him. I questioned my neighbors, and no one had seen him. I went to the dog pound, but he wasn't there. This really has me bugged. I want to know what happened to my dog. Would you give me the time you saw the strange aircraft? For my dog's sake, I hope our stories do not match up. UFO settled down behind house. Dear converted non-believer, I believe you really did see something strange. I can imagine how you feel knowing no one else will believe your story. Let me tell you about my experience. One night, I was looking out of a window in my house and I saw something strange. At first, I thought it was an airplane, but it wasn't. Behind our house, there are some trees, and this thing I saw settled down behind the trees. I don't know what happened then because I was too scared to go out and look for it. But when I tell people about what I saw, they laugh at me. But they can laugh all they want. I know what I saw was not an airplane. I'm not crazy. Is missing dog a prank? Dear converted non-believer, some strange things have been occurring around our house. We live on Providence Road. Early one morning, the same day you described in your letter, our dog awakened us by scratching on the door. I got up and let her out of the house. After a while, she began barking. I went to see what was wrong. When I looked out of the door, I saw a car sitting in the middle of the street almost directly in front of our house. I assume it was you. I was afraid to go get our dog since she would not come when I called, and someone was in front of the house. I went to get my husband, but by the time we returned, our dog was missing and the car was nowhere in sight. We went out to search for our dog, but we couldn't find her. We haven't seen her since that night. We did find a strange circle, a yellowish-orange colored circle near where I last saw the dog. If this is some prankster's idea of a joke, it is not funny at all. If you took our dog, please be kind enough to return her. There will be no questions asked. If anyone knows anything about this incident, please contact us through personal chat. We want our dog back. Strange object in sky was no dream. Dear converted non-believer, in response to your letter about seeing a UFO, I want you to know that I also saw a strange object in the sky last week. It was very high up and looked like 4 lights in the shape of a square. Then the lights seemed to spread apart and go close together again. I told my mother about what I saw, but when she got outside, it was gone. About 2 nights later, I saw the same object again. I live in the southeast section of town. Sometimes it seems to stand still and then shift in different directions. The lights seem to pulsate. These are true facts. I don't know what it is, but I know I saw it and I wasn't dreaming. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you liked it. Which state should I cover next for UFO sightings? Let me know in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with everything I post, and also it really helps my channel out. If you have your own scary story or close encounter to share, you can either send it in the comments, post it on my subreddit, r/ihaveaspookystory, or send it to my Gmail, pinkpossiblystories@gmail.com. Good night, sleep tight, and don't let the shadows bite.